We'll get this started. Today we wanted to talk to you about our view on digitization in oil and gas. Of course, this is a topic which needs no introduction and has been discussed at length. So what we will focus today on is the futuristic trends on digital and digitization and the themes that are going to be important as far as our perspective goes. Now, from an oil and gas industry perspective, we are at a cusp of multiple mega trends which are colliding together to create the perfect storm. And all these mega trends are what have been discussed since morning. So I'll quickly go through the energy transition, the focus about decarbonization, ESG, and how oil and gas sector can contribute to that, to the new business models and rise of electrification. I wouldn't, dare say that we have had such a huge change in such a short span of time, anytime before in the history of the sector. So while all these mega trends are playing out, what is happening is to enable these, you are looking for levers underpinning the entire transformation, and digitization is a key lever which underpins that transformation the way we see in the oil and gas sector. Of course, there are other levers around how you're looking at talent of the future, how you're looking at business models of the future, how you're looking at ecosystems and so on. But digitization pretty much comes up in every conversation that you're having as part of these transformations. If I was to move forward, not just the mega trends which are shaping up the sector per se, but if you see the overall digital trends, right, what is in currency as far as digitization and digital transformation go, they are also of relevance to the sector. So if you start with the themes around digitally enabled distribution, now when you have so many innovations happening in direct-to-customer, e-commerce or omni-channel, customer-focused brands and so on, what are those learnings that can be taken back to, for example, the retail side of oil and gas? Similarly, when you're looking at new energy and business models, what are those learnings which can be taken back to the core operations and core business models of oil and gas sector? These digital tools and platforms provide ready opportunities for oil and gas companies to consider as they are managing this transition. Now, while this is all well understood, let me now get into what the future holds for us. Now, whenever we talk about digitization and digital, we all hear about the same 5 or 7 big technologies. And if I was to take a straw poll here, I think it's going to be the same. So you have artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, everybody talks about only 5 or 7. But what I wanted to highlight to you is actually the spread of digital technologies is much larger, much wider. So what you see here is what we call as a periodic table of digital technologies. There are more than 50 technologies which exist today which are transforming the world the way we know it. The color coding on this one essentially talks about the families, the digitization technology family. So the one, for example, you see in light blue here, for example, talks about data analytics. The one on the left-hand side talks about the family, which is the artificial intelligence family. Now, what do I define these families, and why do I talk about these together? Go back to periodic table 101. What you could do by learning about the properties of elements that you know about is that you could predict or you could estimate the properties of elements not yet found, right? Same principles apply over here. So the progress that, let's say, you are making in deep learning could be then applied to, let's say, cognitive computing or artificial intelligence using quantum computing or computer vision and so on. So within each family, you could actually pretty much lift and shift innovations, and therefore the speed of innovation is faster, number one. Number two is all these families, they combine together to create solutions. So when you're talking about solutioning, you will possibly pick up, for example, text analytics from one side to cognitive from the other side, and now you have, let's say, a legal contract management solution, correct? Or you put blockchain from one side, you pick up cognitive from the other side, and then you add some smart computing on top of that, then you have smart contracts, self-driven contracts, and so on and so forth. So what you could do is pretty much the way you create a new compound, pick and choose and create your ideas and themes. I also get questions saying this looks fairly futuristic, right? Is it already here, or is it something we are talking about which will happen in the 20 years from now? The answer is it is already here. So if you look from an oil and gas sector perspective, in upstream, midstream, and downstream, these technologies are already being used, right? And for example, in upstream side, you have digital twins coming up, which are used to improve your asset performance, asset management, maintenance, and so on. In the midstream side, you are using sensorization to look at the health of the midstream assets. On the downstream side, for example, you are using chatbots to improve customer experience and engagement, which is more closer to a classical retail digitization rather than an oil and gas digitization. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the change is much faster than what we believe it is. These technologies are already here. Maybe they are bundled in a way that we don't even talk about them. They are already here. They are already being used. And as an oil and gas company, I think it's very important for you to chart out that course for yourself, right? Now, while this is a technology view, I also understand that today we have a lot of functional leaders in this session. So if you look at it, the synthesis of solutions. So how, for example, if you want to pick up upstream and say, I want to look at real-time rig operations and performance monitoring, if you deconstruct that, it is built by IoT, it is built by cloud, it is built by AI, all working together, right? If you see the chart in front of you. So what is happening is all these solutions are coming together and creating value for your organization. So if you have to invest, the other lens of this is, if you have to invest, look at what are those basic building blocks that you can invest on. What are those technologies out of the 50 or 60 technologies that you want to take your bet on, and eventually go with that and build the solutions around those. Not all of these technologies are at the same level of maturity, right? So, of course, there are some technologies which are quite mature. There are some which are just coming up. So, for example, if I was to talk about platform as a service or virtual reality and so on, they are already here. They are being used pretty much day in and day out. So there's nothing fancy and futuristic about it anymore, right? But if you look at the time horizon of the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there are many more technologies which are of interest. So for example, the entire theme around quantum computing is super interesting. Right? And there are two countries of the world which are investing heavily in it. One is US, one is China, because they know that it is going to be an orbit shift. It's not going to be a linear shift. It's going to be an orbit shift in what you can do once you have at-scale quantum computing deployed for you. What we saw in classical analytics versus AI, this maybe a bigger order of magnitude jump is going to become possible once you move to QC. Similarly, if I was to look at brain-computer interface, we all hear about Neuralink and what is happening around that, and every technology starts with that, with its fair share of experiments and possibly skeptics. But we believe this is again something which is going to be in the reckoning in about 15 years, or 10 to 15 years from now. The use cases will start out and they will move in. What do I mention by start out and move in? There are many use cases which you will see immediately being deployed for you as oil and gas sector. Some of these I showed in the previous slide. But what will also happen is, because the boundaries of the sector are blurring, so therefore there is going to be a lateral inspiration that will happen from, let's say, retail sector, maybe from cement sector, because it's again a large asset-heavy industry. Maybe from logistics sector, because you run large logistics operations, and so on and so forth. And those ideas, those themes or innovations are also going to go back and play into your organizations, right? So the takeaway from this particular theme over here is digital technology set A, of course, is fairly wide, and it is not static. So what you need to do is see where would you invest your current dollars on, which is going to be probably the central circle here, versus where would you put your risk dollars on or risk capital on, which probably will be the outer two circles. You want to be in it, but you don't want to expose yourself too much, right? And that could happen through collaborations, that could happen through working with startups or your own acceleration centers or incubation centers, and see how can you leverage these things. Why this is important? And as the speaker just before me spoke about, increasingly, the performance of an oil and gas company depends a lot on the kind of algorithms they have, intelligence they have been able to build, computer models, and so on. And if all of them to be successful, this is pretty much the core. The point I'm trying to bring out is digitization or digital is no longer a back office or a supporting enabler, working in some function somewhere. In many, many cases, this is going to be the core. So if you're running, for example, into a transformation around electrification or EVs as a diversification strategy, that entire theme has to be built on digital platforms because your competitors are actually building it as a digital native company, grounds up. So therefore, to compete with them, you have to be investing in digitization as the core of the business, not as an adjunct. So key themes that I wanted to leave behind from my talk here. The first one is there is an amazing amount of volatility which is there, both outside, which is in your ecosystem around energy transition, ESG, and so on, and inside. There are two ways to look at volatility, right? One is to say that, how do I respond? How do I survive? But there are other businesses which say, how do I thrive in volatility? Because it gives me that opportunity to experiment and explore and innovate, and therefore ride the wave rather than being impacted by the wave. So that's a big mindset shift that's going to happen. The second one I already spoke about is around the industry boundaries, right? A lot of your future competitors, and they are possibly energy companies, may not be oil and gas companies in the traditional sense. They are going to come from places which are far out from what a classical oil and gas company looks like. So if there is a blurring of industry boundaries, the takeaway for us is there is going to be a blurring of what do you do with digitization in your organization, right? So digitization is not something that the Amazons of the world do only. It has to be your core theme as well. The key challenge which we will face is on talent, right? If you're looking at IoT or cloud or the most amazing data scientists, how do you make sure they want to come and join you and work for you rather than working for a startup in Silicon Valley? So the key theme will be around that, and therefore ideas around how do you use talent as a service, or I would say inorganic talent acquisition, engagement models, that will be in play. So FTE model, for example, is pretty much going to be phased out. So you'll have talent as a service, job workers, contract workers, knowledge workers which are working for a project and so on, working for you. And on the last three things, essentially, there is going to be a significant value being created in your core operations, as well as in emerging areas like decarbonization. But what you would want to do is just have a relook at overall digital plan and see whether you are building the core appropriately. So with that, I would like to complete my talk. We'll be happy to take any questions at the end of the session. Thank you.